Turns out they owed me over $1 million. And I found out because a sheriff's cruiser rolled up to my ranch one quiet Montana morning and tried to tell me I was trespassing on my own driveway. My own driveway, like I'd somehow wandered onto somebody else's land by accident, like I didn't pour sweat into that dirt for 2 decades. And the second I saw who was standing behind him, smiling like she'd rehearsed it in the mirror, I knew Mallory Ridge was hiding something big. I was out by the cattle gate doing the kind of boring, honest maintenance nobody posts online, tightening a hinge, listening to the wind move through dry grass, thinking about nothing in particular, when I heard tires crunch on gravel, that slow, deliberate crunch that doesn't belong to friends or deliveries. Sheriff Wade Collins rolled to a stop like he'd been called into a mess. He didn't ask for one hand resting on his belt. Out of habit, eyes scanning my driveway like a man trying to decide whether he's about to be lied to. And then Heather Mallory stepped out behind him. HOA president, queen of clipboard, self-appointed guardian of community standards, dressed like suburban authority, had a uniform. She had a stack of papers clutched to her chest, and her mouth did that tight little smile like she'd just won something. Cole Wade said, stiff voice, official tone, "We got a call. HOA filed a report saying you're trespassing on community property." I swear my brain stalled for a second. Trespassing. On my own land. I looked down at the dirt under my boots like it might explain how reality got this stupid. "Wade," I said, slow and careful, "this is my driveway, my land, my house. I've lived here 21 years. Heather didn't wait for an invitation. Of course she didn't. She stepped forward, papers lifted, like they were holy scripture. "Your structures violate multiple community standards, Cole. Your solar array is an eyesore, and that cattle gate doesn't meet our approved materials list. We warned you." I took a breath, the kind you take when you know matching a bully's volume only feeds them. "Heather," I said for the last time, "I'm not part of your HOA. This ranch predates Mallory Ridge by decades." Her jaw tightened, and the smile got colder. "Everyone who lives within the boundary of Mallory Ridge follows our rules. No exceptions." Wade shifted, uncomfortable, because he knew my father. He knew my family didn't play loose with deed lines. But procedure is procedure, and paperwork, real or fake, puts a lawman in a spot. His hand stayed far from his cuffs, though, and his eyes flicked to me with something like a quiet apology. "Cole, help me out," he said low. "If there's paperwork that says you're separate from the HOA, now's the time." "There is," I told him, "and if anyone bothered to walk into the county office instead of waving rule books around, we wouldn't be standing here." Heather's smirk sharpened. "We have maps. According to our documentation, your driveway intersects community access lanes. Your documentation is wrong." Wade cleared his throat, glancing between us like he could physically feel the tension. "I'm not here to escalate, just to verify the complaint." "The complaint is fake," I said. Heather bristled like I'd insulted her religion. "This is exactly why you need oversight. You can't just build what you want, put up whatever you want, drag down neighborhood values. We have standards." "Standards," I repeated, and stepped forward just enough to make her flinch. "Heather, your HOA was built on land carved out of my father's old pasture. Not 1 inch of this ranch belongs to you." For a flicker, just a flicker, I saw fear cross her face. Then it hardened into something colder, like she'd decided fear was a luxury. "We'll see what the county says about that." Wade sighed. "Cole, I'm going to have to file that. This was investigated, but if you have your deed handy..." "I'll bring it by later," I said. "Right now, I'd like both of you off my property." Heather didn't move. She lifted one paper like it was a gavel. "These violations stand until resolved. Expect fines." I couldn't help it. A dry laugh slipped out. "Fines? For land you don't own?" Her smile chilled. "We'll let the law decide." She turned and walked back toward her SUV, heels clicking on my gravel like she owned every rock. Wade tipped his hat, gave me that look that said he hated being used as someone else's blunt instrument, then followed her down my drive. When the dust settled, I stood there with that hinge in my hands, staring at the empty space they'd left behind, and the only thought in my head was, she wasn't just power hungry, she was confident, too confident. Confidence like that usually comes from paperwork. And sure enough, the next morning, a thick envelope sat in my mailbox, the HOA's fancy seal stamped on the corner like a threat. Inside, 3 violation notices, each more ridiculous than the last. Unauthorized structure modification, noise disturbance from machinery, unregistered guests occupying driveway space, my solar panels, my tractor, my nephew's truck from last weekend. They'd weaponized ordinary life. Another envelope showed up that afternoon. More violations. Then an email blast went out to the whole subdivision claiming I was destabilizing community aesthetics and lowering property values with non-compliant rural structures. I hadn't changed a damn thing in 20 years. By sundown, neighbors who used to wave wouldn't even look up from their porches. That's when I saw Miguel Ortega at his fence line watching me like a man who's seen this movie before and hates the ending. "She's coming after you hard," he said. "Why?" I asked. "What's her angle?" Miguel's eyes tracked the ridgeline where Mallory Ridge rooftops cut the horizon like a row of teeth. "Power," he said. "And the board lets her do whatever she wants. She'll drown you in paperwork until you bend. Same way she did the Turners, same way she did the Bowdens." "Gone?" I asked. He nodded once, tired. Sold, packed, left. They couldn't stand it anymore. That's when anger turned into something sharper strategy. Back at my kitchen table, I spread those violations out and noticed something that made my skin go cold. Every claim referenced a boundary line that didn't match my deed. They weren't just harassing me. They were building a case using a map I'd never seen. Miguel jogged over again before I even got my truck started, folded paper in hand. "You should see this," he said, voice urgent. It was a community alert from the HOA app, something I wasn't even supposed to access. Heather had posted that I was refusing lawful compliance, that I was a risk to neighborhood cohesion, and there was a poll asking residents whether the HOA should seek county enforcement to deal with me. "She's trying to isolate you," Miguel warned. "Once the neighborhood turns, she'll try to force you under their jurisdiction. Be careful, Cole. Heather doesn't come after people unless she thinks she already has something on them." That line stuck in my ribs like a warning. Because he was right. Heather's certainty wasn't random. She believed she had something official, something that could shut me down. But my father treated deed lines like sacred text. Nothing had changed in county tax rolls. There was no way an HOA had any claim near our property unless someone had rewritten reality on paper. So I went to the only place paper tells the truth, county records. Linda Barrett was at the counter. Short gray hair, thick glasses, the expression of a woman who's seen every land scam and petty dispute in the last 30 years. She looked up and said, "Morning, Cole. You don't usually show up unless somebody lit a fire under you." "They did," I said, dropping the binder on her counter. "HOA's claiming my driveway is community property. Sheriff got called." She stared at me for half a second, then snorted. "Impossible. Your father would haunt this building before he let someone redraw your boundary line." "That's what I thought," I said. "But they filed something." Her expression shifted, not fear, interest. "The dangerous kind." "Parcel number," she said. I gave it. She typed. The screen flickered and her brow creased. "Well," she murmured, "that's not right." My pulse ticked up. "What?" "Your parcel shows annotations added during the developer transition in 2001. Easement overlays, access notes. Boundaries widened on planning documents," she said, clicking deeper. "But none of those adjustments reflect legally, not in the recorded deed." "So the HOA is using a planning map," I said, "not the actual legal one." "Looks that way." Then she pulled up a scanned page and tapped it like she was about to change my life. And here's something else. On her screen, multiple marked parcels highlighted inside the Mallory Ridge subdivision. Trail entrance, drainage basin, pavilion pad, even the mailbox cluster. Why are those marked?" I asked, already feeling that drop in my gut. Linda looked at me over her glasses. "Because they belong to you." "What?" "Your father retained them. Strategic ones." "The developer didn't buy everything," she said, matter of fact, like it was obvious. "The HOA has been using your land for 22 years for free, without a lease and according to county record, without a permanent easement." That was the twist right there, like the floor shifting under my feet. Heather wasn't just wrong about my driveway, her whole kingdom was built on borrowed soil. Linda printed maps, parcel files, easement notes, paper spilling out like the county was finally exhaling a secret it held too long. As she handed me the stack, she said quietly, "Cole, if they've been operating facilities on your land without permission, you're holding the cards." I left with leverage sitting heavy in my chest. Not fear anymore. Leverage. And questions. Why had nobody noticed? Did they never check? Or did they check and ignore it? Next day, I called Tommy Reed, the surveyor, who worked with my father back in the day. When he pulled up in that dust-covered pickup with GPS gear piled in the bed, he grinned like he already knew this would be fun. I told him I need truth in fluorescent orange. He laughed. "Then let's give them a show." We walked the boundary like we were stringing tripwires. Trailhead, pavilion pad, retention basin, mailbox cluster, Tommy measuring, logging, marking certified coordinates. Then the flags went in. bright orange stakes hammered into the earth like accusations. And like she had a radar for threats to her ego. Heather stepped out of her front door, clipboard pressed to her chest, nails clicking, eyes sharp. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. Tommy didn't even look up. "Marking parcels legally owned by Cole Maddox. County records confirm it." "That can't be right," she snapped. "It is," he said, lifting the next stake. She stepped in front of him like she could block reality with a blazer. "You can't mark community land with unauthorized materials. These flags violate HOA aesthetic regulations." Tommy finally looked up, calm as a man reading weather. "HOA regulations don't apply to land you don't own." Neighbors started spilling out, first a few, then a dozen, confusion spreading across sidewalks as they followed the orange line like it was a crime scene outline. Heather tried to command them back inside like a queen, ordering peasants to look away, but the crowd didn't listen the way they used to. Even Janice Fuller, one of Heather's board members, stood there staring at those flags like they were lit fuses. "Janice," Heather snapped, "tell them this is community land." Janice swallowed, then said the thing that killed Heather's momentum. "We should probably verify this with the county." Heather's face went pale, and I leaned closer low enough only she could hear. "This is just the start." Because flags don't just mark land, they mark liability. That night I installed cameras. Not because I feared her, because I expected her. 2 nights later, my footage proved I was right. A figure sneaking along my property line at 10:42 p.m., dumping yard waste onto my land like it was a trash can. Then her husband backing a landscaping trailer into my pasture, leaving ruts deep enough to swallow a boot. And then the clip that pushed everything over the edge. Night 7, 10:29 p.m. Heather again, this time with a can of green spray paint. She crouched by Tommy's orange boundary flags and started repainting them to match the grass, one, then another, trying to erase my property lines like a kid hiding a bad grade. That's not HOA drama, that's trespassing and tampering with legal survey markers. Next morning, I caught her at the mailbox cluster like clockwork. "Morning, Heather," I said, easy. "I don't have time," she muttered. "You should make time," I replied, pulling out my phone. I played the video. Her face drained like someone pulled the plug. "You can't record people like that," she stammered. "It's on my land," I said. "You stepped onto it without permission. Multiple times, including after dark." A couple residents nearby went quiet, curiosity rising. Heather looked around like she could will witnesses away. "Delete it," she hissed. "No," I said, "but I will be making copies." She tried to recover, but her voice cracked. "You can't prove that's me." So I played the part where she looked straight at the camera. The neighborhood froze. Heather froze. Then she grabbed her mail with trembling hands and hurried off, leaving a silence behind her that felt like the first real crack in a dam. That afternoon, I called Grace Holloway, the attorney Linda practically worshipped. Grace's office used to be a feed store, small, quiet, and dangerously efficient. She went through my binder like she was chewing through steel, then laid my father's deed beside the county reports. "These documents show your land never transferred," she said, "not even provisionally. Every structure they built on your parcels is unauthorized." "Okay," I said, "how bad is it?" Grace tapped a date with her pen. The developer had a temporary construction easement filed in 2001. It expired in 2017, never renewed. I blinked. "So they've been operating on my land illegally for years." "Correct," she said, and her smile wasn't warm, it was surgical. "Back rent damages, restoration costs, penalties. And if we can prove the board knew, it gets uglier." Then she looked up, eyes locked on mine. "And every violation they issued you is invalid. They have no jurisdiction." My chest loosened just a little. The bully wasn't just loud, she was powerless. But bullies don't surrender. They panic, they double down. Heather taped new violations to my gate even after Grace sent a cease and desist. That's when Miguel brought his folder, years of Heather's baseless letters. And Janice showed up with a binder thicker than mine. I recorded every meeting she said. Everything she's ever said on record is in here. We laid it all out on my dining table, maps, minutes, letters, recordings, like we were assembling a storm. And Grace, calm as a judge, dropped the number that made the room go silent. Maintenance penalties alone, she said, minimum $78,000. Back rent. Rough estimate, another $200,000. And removal costs if Cole refuses renewal, pavilion, playground, mailbox, cluster, drainage, infrastructure. The low estimate is $1.2 million. That's when it hit me. Heather hadn't just harassed me. She'd risked bankrupting her own community to protect a lie. So I made my decision, not revenge truth in daylight. "We go public," I said. And the plan that made Miguel laugh out loud was the same plan that made Heather's soul leave her body when she heard about it. A community barbecue. On my land. With residents, county officials, and law enforcement invited. Topic: land use, property rights, and transparency. Saturday, my pasture filled up. Kids ran around like they'd forgotten what fear tasted like. Miguel worked the grill like he'd waited years to flip a burger for justice. Sheriff Collins showed up just observing, which is sheriff speak for I'm here because someone might do something stupid. At 12:14 p.m., Heather's white SUV rolled up slow and deliberate like a parade float carrying pure indignation. She stepped out in her power outfit, blazer, clipboard, lips thin as fishing wire, and marched toward me like she could still command the world. "This gathering is not authorized," she announced loud enough to carry. "This land is under HOA jurisdiction." "Stop," Sheriff Collins cut in sharp. "You requested a civil standby. Your job is to remain peaceful, same as mine." Her mouth snapped shut, but her eyes burned. I stepped up onto a makeshift platform, 2 hay bales and a sheet of plywood, and let the crowd settle. "Thanks for coming," I said. "Today isn't about conflict, it's about truth. Who owns what, and who has the right to enforce anything on this land." I held up the county maps, the deed, the expired easement documents, Tommy's survey. The land under the playground, the pavilion, the trailhead, the mailbox cluster. I said none of it belongs to Mallory Ridge HOA. It belongs to me. It has for decades. You could feel the shock ripple. Someone whispered, "Wait, seriously?" Another muttered, "She told us it was community land." Grace stepped forward, calm and deadly. "The HOA's authority depends on ownership or easements. These easements expired in 2017. The HOA has been operating facilities illegally, and by county code there are penalties. And if Cole chooses not to renew, the HOA can be required to remove structures within 60 days. Heather snapped, voice cracking. "This is harassment, false claims, fabricated documents." I pulled out my phone. "Then let's talk about fabrication." We played the footage: yard waste dumping, trespassing at night, repainting survey markers. Heather's face clear as day. Gasps turned into anger. That deputy she'd brought for civil standby stared at her like he'd just realized he was standing next to the problem. Heather tried to say it was out of context, tried to claim manipulation, tried to pretend she wasn't the same woman on the screen. But the crowd had seen enough. And then from the middle of that pasture, a voice I didn't expect spoke up, Commissioner Webb quietly present until now. "According to these documents," he said firm, "you don't have the right to enforce anything on this land. Not today, not ever." Heather looked like she'd been slapped by a legal fact. "County review will be conducted," Webb added, officially. Heather backed away shaky. "This isn't over," she whispered. But everybody knew it was. The next morning, an emergency HOA meeting got called because lies love fluorescent lighting and folding chairs. Grace told me, "Go stand in the back, say nothing, let the truth collapse on her." The community room was packed. Residents who used to whisper now spoke openly, arms crossed, eyes hard. Heather walked in, late papers clutched like a lifeline, and declared everything doctored. Janice stood up immediately and asked the question that cut her in half. "So you're calling the county clerk a liar? The surveyor? The attorney? The elected officials?" Heather snapped, "They're in on it." That's when the room collectively realized she wasn't powerful, she was cornered. Commissioner Webb walked in with Supervisor Martinez. "We reviewed the documents," Webb said. "They check out. The HOA operated facilities on private land without permission. Formal investigation is open: financial misuse, unauthorized improvements, fraudulent representation." Sheriff Collins entered after them, official business written on his face. He walked right past Heather, straight to me. "Mr. Maddox," he said loud enough for the room, "your evidence has been submitted. Your claims are valid." Heather tried to bring up her restraining order. Collins shot her a look cold enough to freeze fire. "Denied," he said. "And your statements raise concerns about malicious intent." Then Janice handed Martinez the folder that finished the job: emails, messages, recordings, and Heather's ugly private posts smearing neighbors. The room erupted. People who'd been bullied for years finally had proof that it wasn't just rules. It was cruelty wearing authority like a costume. Collins raised a hand. "Enough." Then he turned to Heather. "Ma'am, step outside with me." Her clipboard hung useless at her side like a badge she no longer had the right to carry. Board members slid resignation letters onto the table, one, then another, then more, like rats abandoning a sinking ship. And just like that, Mallory Ridge HOA didn't crack. It imploded. A few days later, what was left of the board invited me to negotiate. Not threaten, not fine, not posture, negotiate. We signed a 10-year lease for the parcels they'd been using, fair monthly payment, HOA, responsible for maintenance and compliance, and an oversight clause that kept their power inside actual legal boundaries where it belongs. And here's the part people assume next, like I took the money and did a victory lap. I didn't. I set up a trade scholarship, $5,000 a year, for a local kid going into electrical, plumbing, carpentry, agriculture, the kind of work that keeps real communities standing. Because once you've seen what fake power does, you start valuing the kind that actually builds something. A month later, I stood at my fence line at sunset, watching light lean across the same land my father and grandfather walked, hearing that cattle gate creak softly in the wind. The solar panels Heather wanted gone gleamed like quiet defiance. Everything was intact. Everything was mine. And justice didn't arrive with shouting. It arrived with proof, patience, and the law. That's the lesson I didn't understand until this happened. Power without accountability always turns rotten. And the scariest tyrants aren't the ones with guns or badges. They're the ones with clipboards and social pressure, hiding behind standards while they grind people down one fine at a time. The only thing that stops them is sunlight, documents, witnesses, and somebody willing to stand still on their own dirt and say no. So here's my question for you. If you found out your HOA or your town or your workplace was built on a lie, do you think the person who exposes it is a hero or a troublemaker? And where's the line between justice and revenge when the bill comes due? Drop your take in the comments. Tell me what you would have done in my shoes, or share the wildest HOA story you've ever lived through, because I swear some of these folks treat a neighborhood like it's their personal kingdom. And I want to know how you handled it when somebody tried to rule you.